Happy Tuesday, friends, or whatever day you might be watching or listening. Welcome to the Way Home, Crossnore Communities for Children's Facebook Live show and our podcast. My name is Holly Kessler. I'm your host of the show, and I am the Senior Director of Community Relations at Crossnore. We are right here on Facebook Live every Tuesday afternoon. I so enjoy talking with staff members or community partners about the work that we do at Crossnore, ways that we are engaging in the community, about the child welfare system, and other topics that are hopefully of interest to you. If you miss our live show, you can always rewatch on our Facebook feed or catch the show on our YouTube channel. And the podcast comes out on Fridays at crossnore.org. So there are lots of ways to engage with us each week, and I hope that you will do so. Today, my guest is Dr. Sarah Norris. Sarah has been on the show before. She is Crossnore's Chief Program Officer, and today she's going to talk with us about working in nonprofits and in child welfare specifically, what her career path has been like, and why this could be a good career choice for somebody who's listening. So I hope you'll enjoy this show and help me welcome Dr. Sarah Norris to our show today. Hello, friend.
Good morning, Holly. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great to be here. Doing well today.
Good. Looks like the sun's shining where you are.
It sure is. I'm hoping it'll stay that way and some flowers can keep blooming.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, for folks who maybe are new to our show, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us about your role here at Crossnore and anything else that you want to share.
Sure. So as Holly mentioned, I am Dr. Sarah Norris. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Crossnore. I've been here almost 5 years. And so in my role, I oversee all of our program staff. So that includes foster care, our campus-based, both campus-based and community-based. We have some prevention services within the community, mainly in the Triad region, which include 2 different programs, Home Builders and Family Foundations. Mm-hmm. We also have a professional foster parent program called Bridging Families. We have therapists and other folks that serve all our kids that we serve across the state. And so all those folks kind of fall under the program division that I get to work with some great folks every day.
Wow. Y'all are busy. That's a lot of work to do.
Yes, we are busy. People are staying very connected with all the things happening in the state and within our agency. And so lots of good work happening.
Absolutely. Because you also do kind of a lot of work at the legislative advocacy kind of level as well. So
yes. Yeah, we are real big on trying to impact changes both in legislation and in policy at the state and federal level. Mm-hmm. So a lot of our work of either what we're seeing on the ground and how it plays into how things are happening and need to change, we're able to give some feedback and then also some advocacy around what we think should be different. So that's really great.
Yeah, that's like a whole nother show topic.
Correct.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, Sarah, you have been in this field for a long time, and I'm always really interested in what makes people choose their career fields. For me, I sort of feel like I kind of fell into it, coming from one helping profession into another one. But what made you decide to go into child welfare in your career?
Yeah, that is a great question. Similarly to you, I think this field kind of chose me. So interestingly, I actually started my journey planning to be a therapist, an individual therapist. So that was the first kind of right out of undergraduate school, went into a graduate program, and I enjoyed the work, got that degree and was working individually with some folks as I was working on my license. And one of the things that kind of came to me or I realized in part of that process was that I was much more interested in supporting the family system work rather than just pulling the individual out. I wanted to be able to kind of impact in a different way. As I started to explore that, it kind of connected with my own background of family connections being super important. I have 3 siblings myself. We are all very close and stay connected even though we don't live close to each other. My dad grew up as one of 9 kids, so I have a lot of extended sibling and cousins and all those things that just growing up, family was community, really. So I have 2 kids of my own and their connections and my connections to family. So it wasn't surprising to think about how I wanted to see families succeed. And that was kind of what led to the child welfare track within therapy, within counseling, within mental health, because it was really about how can we help families work through things that they need to be able to stay a family unit, or to get back together if they have had some separation. Because, at any given time, any of us could be on the helping end or on the helper end.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of where my journey began. And it sort of went from there into the child welfare field as I moved through different roles within that field.
Okay. Well, that's another thing that you and I have in common, is that one time that I thought I was going to go in to grad school and become a therapist myself, and was kind of on that track. And then I think for several reasons, and you really put words to one of the things that troubled me, was the idea of sort of working just with an individual and not really being able to address sort of family systems issues or whatever. The other thing that was hard for me is that, I feel like people that are drawn maybe to the therapy profession, I think sometimes we feel like, we can sort of see the problem, we can sort of see maybe the answer, but you're not really supposed to give advice as a therapist. But I always felt like, but they're coming to me to ask for help. Why shouldn't I just tell them what to do?
Yes, that's a really great point. And I think one of the things that sort of started my first role within child welfare, which was an investigative social worker within the DSS space, is very solution focused. So similar to what you're just describing, it was identifying the concerns and then helping make a plan. And then the actual implementation of the plan to see changes wasn't as much of what I focused on. I was more kind of on that front end, which I found to be a much more gratifying for my brain and the kind of the way it works to be able to be supportive in that way versus the individual therapist way. So I think I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back now, I kind of see how that fits.
Yeah, I get that too. So you've mentioned that first position that you held. What other kind of positions have you held in this field? Because you didn't just wake up one day as the chief program officer of a private agency.
Right. So I started out as a line social worker, and I did both regular week job where I was an investigator and worked with families through the week. And then I shifted to an after hours on call worker for a while. So I was doing weekends, evenings, which was very challenging. It was exciting and challenging at the same time. From there, I moved into a supervisor role where I was able to supervise, all still within DSS, foster care, adoptions, are working with families once they were already in the system and kind of needing some supports and some plans to be able to help get DSS moved out of their life. And so I did some of that for a while, and then I ended up in a overarching leadership role of that entire division in the county I was in for a period of time, which included everything that's within the DSS child welfare division, from the intake when people first call and make a report, all the way to adoptions and licensing and the whole spectrum. I did that for about 3 years, and then from there I worked at the state for a couple of years, where I worked with counties across the state on looking at their processes and policies and how they do things, and giving them some consulting and feedback on how they can improve where they felt that there were needs. And that was great, but that was before I was with Crossnore. So I learned a whole lot. I met a lot of really wonderful people across the state, and some great folks doing lots of good work. But one thing that sort of drew me toward Crossnore, not only within the child welfare space, but being that it's a nonprofit, nonprofits have a little bit more ability to be creative and innovative and flexible. And so I was very drawn to the mission of Crossnore, and also drawn to the fact that maybe we didn't have to have quite so many rules and regulations in some spaces, and that we could try things that could be a little bit different with the way a nonprofit set up versus a government entity. So that was part of where I landed with Crossnore in a role that was over the child welfare division here, and then moved into the current role once it became available 3 years ago now, almost. And love the excitement of all the work that we're doing now. And it just sort of has been, each role has been the right time, the right transition, and it's all kind of built off of each other to where I am now with helping support the folks who are doing the work versus kind of being on the ground so much.
Yeah. That's a really interesting distinction that you made between nonprofits and government entities, even though a lot of the work is very similar.
Yes, yes. So we still have to follow rules and
Mhm.
regulations, all the things that are required in the child welfare and mental health space. But we do have some flexibility to try something that's different or new or a little bit of different way that may not be under that specific umbrella. So for instance, our Bridging Families program
Mhm.
is a new program that does not exist outside of what we're doing. And we're making it fit within all the rules and regulations we have to, but we're hopeful that it will help kind of guide where we need new rules or new ways of kind of setting up so other agencies can follow.
Mhm.
And, we would not be able to do that kind of thing if we did not have private funding support.
Right.
So we are hugely, hugely thankful for those folks, agencies, foundations, individuals, families that are able to give when they see something that seems exciting and that is going to make a difference for kids that's new and different. And that's a big piece of what I love about Crossnore, of the amount of support that we get from our funders, our private foundations and private families.
Yeah. And it almost sounds like what you're describing is that we have a little bit more room to be a little more innovative
Mm-hmm.
than perhaps a government agency. I mean, we all know in child welfare, they're, chronically overworked and understaffed and, just doing the absolute best that they can do for the children and families they serve and to get through each day. And that doesn't leave a lot of room for creativity and innovation and how can we do things differently. And so, like you said, with Bridging Families, we've been able to look at a way that maybe something could be done a little differently and help the state get on board with us to do
Right.
that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, there's a very much a reactive child welfare in and of itself is reactive because we are responding to
Right.
things that have already happened. And so then in addition to what you said around folks being overworked and they have to kind of work within these rules and regulations, that does limit the amount of time that folks are able to spend on creative thinking and strategic.
Right. They work so hard
Yes.
and have so many children and families to take care of. Like, I don't blame them. It's not
That's
a
right.
criticism. It just is sort of the nature of their work versus we have a little bit more leeway, as a private agency. So I think that's a really interesting distinction that I hadn't thought about.
Mhm.
You've mentioned a lot of different positions. You have held just tons of different positions, but are there other kinds of positions that folks might be interested in child welfare or in social services?
Yes, definitely. So there's a lot of roles. There's the therapeutic space. There's lots of different types of therapist positions that people can focus on. Individual, some folks focus specifically working with just kids, some with just adults, some with family systems. So there's lots of work in the therapeutic treatment space. In the child welfare space, in addition to being a child welfare social worker, there's also adult services. So there are folks who do adult services social work, and that is their calling, their passion to work with individuals who need support past the age of 18. So I've got lots of coworkers that have gone that track. There are other, if you think of kind of the different types of spaces, all the folks that are within the program division at Crossnore are within the child welfare field. Some of them are serving as a parent role. Like that is exactly where they need to be. They are great working directly with kids, taking care of them. Some are in more of a case management. So those are folks that might be really great at just helping coordinate things and making sure everybody has the right information and they keep up with all the paperwork and things that need happening. And we need those folks. Like they are super, super important.
Absolutely.
And then in addition to that, we have, of course, a lot of need for supervision. So supervisors can be helping support in lots of different ways for all those people that are kind of on the ground. There's space in the court system. So we have GALs, which are volunteers, but there are social workers who actually supervise those volunteers from the guardian ad litem perspective. Guardian ad litems are folks who represent children specifically in court. So there's lots of ways to get involved, and I would encourage anybody that's interested, explore all the different spaces and you'll almost figure out what doesn't fit to then get to what does fit. I think a lot of people are able to kind of maneuver in that way to see which population and how they want to connect with kids and families in something that sort of jives with them specifically.
Yeah. And we have some of those positions open right now at Crossnore too. So, check out our careers page if you're, in a position to actually go to work now, or even if you're just interested in what the qualifications are or how you might, tailor your education to come to work at Crossnore or a similar agency. Speaking of education, you are one of the most educated people that I've ever met, Dr. Norris. But what is the general, is there like a general education track for folks interested in child welfare or even in nonprofits?
Yes. Yep. So definitely, if anybody's interested, looking up a bachelor's degree in social work is definitely a great place to start. I actually don't have a bachelor's degree in social work because of course, like I mentioned, was not thinking this was the track I was going to start out at. So it's not the only way, but there's bachelor's degree and master's degree within social work, mental health, kind of in that general field, counseling. And then depending on the specifics, you kind of want to look at the curriculum and where it fits to match what people are interested in. So some can be more focused on the aging population. Some are going to be more focused on youth. Some are going to be more focused on systems. So there are definitely different ways. But if you want to get a license, you have to get a master's degree. And depending on which master's degree you get, some folks also have a doctorate, depending. But you get that master's degree, which then sets you up for a licensure plan where you have to get clinical hours. And there's a whole track that's easy to find information about depending on which track you choose. And a lot of schools are very willing to help support students as they are trying to determine their track, which way they want to go, finding internships, giving them some experience to be able to get to that final licensure place.
Yeah. And I think internships are super important. We often have openings for interns here at Crossnore as well.
We do.
Whether they're in therapy services or they're in specific programs, or even sort of administrative type of internships where you can get a feel for the child welfare system, but also even just generally working in a nonprofit. So that's a great way to sort of figure out where your sweet spot is, I guess.
Yes. And oftentimes internships can lead to full-time employment.
Sure.
So we have had interns who've worked with us and then they've ended up, when a role has opened, they've been able to be employed, applied, and were able to get that role, or applied somewhere else and got a different role. But yeah, an internship is a great way to get your feet wet before you are officially looking for a job. Yeah.
And what made you decide to pursue your doctorate, especially as an adult, not like right out of your master's, but you just finished that a few years ago and of course, married and kids and already working a job. So what made you decide to pursue that doctorate, and how did you work that into your already very busy life?
That's a great question. So my doctorate's in organizational leadership. So what's neat about kind of when you get to this point in your career, both for me at least, both within the time of where I was with my experience and also the particular degree I chose, it didn't feel like school or work. Of course, I'm probably a person who loves school, and not everybody loves school. So that's one piece to throw out there. But for me, I was able to work it in because I have a very supportive system family who were able to help me with my kids while I needed to go to class and that kind of thing. I've got a wonderful spouse who's very supportive. He's super encouraging. So that's obviously a big piece. For me, choosing the specific degree that I did was around the idea that I love and find a lot of value out of supporting staff from an organizational standpoint and helping them thrive and do their very best work. And so, because if they're thriving, then they can help kids and families or whoever the clients are, whoever they're serving, to be their very best. So for me, it was much about supporting from that level, systems change, strategic thinking, that kind of thing, to be able to make bigger impacts in a different way at the macro level, where I had been spending a lot of time more in the working individual families level. So that was part of what led me to that. And I graduated in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. So I'm glad to have been able to have that experience, and definitely would encourage anyone who is interested in going back to school, whether it's a doctorate, a master's, a bachelor's, an associate's, whatever it is. If you've been thinking about it long enough, it's doable. If you definitely want to do it, I love to help encourage folks to take that first step, because once you're in it, it's, the first step's typically the hardest.
Yeah, I totally agree. And my master's is in organizational leadership as well. And, I felt like it was such a great foundational master's for what I do, sort of on the administrative side of Crossnore, even though I'm not in programs. Our previous chief human resources officer used to ask me, is there a Dr. Kessler in your future? And I was like, no. I was like, we'll leave that up to Dr. Norris. Let her do that. But it is a great degree. And your doctorate, where did you study for your doctorate?
It was at Gardner-Webb University, which is in the western part of North Carolina. And the program was really focused on a practicum. So a lot of organizational leadership, probably similar to what you experienced, was really about on the ground, practical work. And so everything that I experienced in my defense work, as well as the classes, was around how can this truly be applied? Yep. So I was able to utilize a lot of things, and still do, that I learned in that program to not just be an assignment, but really to be helpful in my day-to-day work too.
Yeah, I thought the same thing about my master's program at Regent University, and mine also has a minor in faith-based nonprofit management, which for us at Crossnore was great. It was great learning for me, but it also was super, I wouldn't say super easy, but it was, I guess because it was so practical, it made the assignments and the readings and the papers I had to do really connected to the work that I was doing. And that certainly made it easier, I think. Yeah.
Completely agree. Yeah. I like to read a lot of those kinds of books anyway, so I might as well have gotten a degree while doing it.
That is true too, for sure. Well, as we sort of end up here, why would you recommend this career choice for other folks? I mean, we hear a lot about the hardships in child welfare, not only for the children and families that are involved in the system, but even for the workers. And so what would you say to encourage somebody to consider this as a career choice?
Yes, I definitely think there has to be a purpose and a feeling for a calling to be able to help others. And so if you've got kind of that gut of like, I want to be able to give back, I want to be able to connect and help people, this is a really great way to do it. We all come from family. We all have whatever family looks like for us may be very different, but having those connections are important. And so remembering that this system that we are working in and trying to make better and trying to make changes, because it definitely fails in a lot of places, it's really about movement forward. And this is a great career to be able to support on the ground what is needed for kids and families who are able to look back and think about, individual people who help them, but also to help make it different so that hopefully 20, 30, 50 years from now, we're able to look back and go, oh, wow, I'm glad we learned a lot and are able to do things differently. And so for me, that's the motivation of continuing to move forward. And specifically because I feel very strongly about supporting family connections. Those two pieces together make this a great fit. So if that resonates with anybody, that this would be worth exploring for sure.
That's awesome. Well, tell folks before we end up here how they can learn more about Crossnore, which maybe would help them in their own career choices.
Absolutely. So you can go to www.crossnore.org and you can click around on our website and learn all about the ways to give back, about our specific programs. And then there's a page, you scroll to the bottom, you can click and see some of our openings if any of you already have degrees that fit our work. But you can go there, as well as Facebook and all our other social media ways to connect.
Yes, there are lots of ways to find out about us. Well, Dr. Norris, thank you so much for the work that you do, both at Crossnore and in our community as a whole. And thank you so much for sharing about your work today.
Thank you, Holly. It was great to be with you.
Glad to have you. Friends, as I have thanked Dr. Norris for being with us today, let me also say thanks to each of you who are watching or listening. We so appreciate the opportunity to tell you about Crossnore. For more information, please visit our website at crossnore.org or follow us on our social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. That's it for today, but I hope you'll join us again next week right here on The Way Home.